And we're live. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Art and Science of DevOps Coaching, where we deep dive into the world of digital transformations, committed to bringing you insights from seasoned experts like our guest today, who are one of the game changers in DevOps. And today, together, we've prepared another episode for you with the title Effective Coaching Based on DASA DevOps Fundamentals. And I have the pleasure to have here with me two of the co-authors that are also both trainers and coaches within the same domain. And their combined experience of almost 50 years covers diverse sectors and a broad range of clients and institutions across various countries. So, without further ado, our first guest joining us from the Netherlands is Dave van Herpen, an independent, agile, lean, and DevOps change. Dave, let me see, consultant, coach, advisor, improver, speaker, facilitator, and a trainer. And you've helped more than 50 organizations, I've counted, with your broad range of expertise, spanning at least 7 industries. And what is very much compelling for us today, you're one of the 4 co-authors of the training of DASA DevOps Fundamental. So Dave, my pleasure to welcome you with us today.
Thank you, Marian. That's a lovely introduction.
Thank you, my pleasure. And next up, it is also my pleasure to have you, Jan. You're a senior trainer, business IT consultant, coach, researcher, and public speaker in various fields like Agile, DevOps, business information management, service management, among others. And Jan is also co-founder of 3 companies to cover key topics in quite interesting domains like Blue Oceans, Lean Startup, Anti-Fragility, and governance domains. And again, last but not least, Jan is one of the co-authors of the DevOps Fundamentals training. Jan, happy to welcome you aboard.
Thanks for having me, Marian.
Thank you too for being here again. And together with you, seasoned expert in Agile and DevOps coaching, we will review your personal DevOps and Agile journeys, insights, practical strategies for effective coaching, and let us discuss how to properly assess team readiness, adapt to various maturity levels, and measure success in a DevOps context in a very pragmatic way. And now that we've introduced you guys, let's deep dive into the heart of our conversation. And well, the compelling event has been out there for quite some time. The newly updated DevOps Fundamentals training has just been released. I've seen quite a few trainings scheduled all over the globe. So Spain, Latin America, India, and so on and so on. And as coaching professionals, we look up to this training to equip us with the knowledge and tools that we need to guide teams and organizations towards further DevOps excellence. Fortunately or not, knowing the theory is only the beginning. I did myself the trainer training, but I am very much excited how to apply that knowledge in the real world, adapting it to diverse industries, contexts, company cultures, and teams, and overcoming the challenges of change is where, for me personally, the magic happens. Quick disclaimer, by the end of the session, we will have a short survey for you guys. So for you, our guest viewers, our listeners, and we would like to ask you to provide feedback, as we believe in feedback loops as DevOps practitioners. Your input is incredibly valuable for us for shaping future events, picking up the right topics, and improving your overall experience. So we strongly encourage you to take a moment and share your experience with us. And before we get to that, let's now set the stage a bit. So moving to you, Dave, can you start by telling us, could you define for our audience here, what is DASA DevOps Fundamentals and how are you related to this initiative?
Yeah. Well, for me, DASA DevOps Fundamentals, actually, the most important thing I find about this is that we have a common taxonomy. Because if you are into our industry and you ask 10 people for what is it, what's it all about, what are the basic principles, and what's the actual foundation of what we're actually doing in practice, you get a lot of different answers and a lot of different perspectives. And it's good that we have built a common repository, a common taxonomy, that we're all building on the same foundation. And to me, that's the most valuable part of it. And not only sharing practices and instruments and methods, etc., that you can use in daily life, but also sharing, what's the why behind it, and why do we actually apply a certain practice in a certain context. And so having that, context-sensitive information that you get in the trainings as well, from practitioners to practitioners, I think that's so valuable. And if you look at my contribution to this whole part, is that I have been experiencing a lot of DevOps adoptions in the past 10 years, 10 to 15 years. I've seen teams struggle and adopt those practices. I've also seen the management teams around them adopt them. And what I've tried to do is actually bring those experiences and that knowledge, what kind of frameworks you can use in which context, what kind of practices are useful, etc. I've tried to bring that into the team to create a new fundamentals, a new foundation.
Awesome. So it's about setting a standard, right? And I will be very much excited to hear about your personal experience, including the messed up stories. But first, same question to you, Jan, setting the stage. What is to you the DASA DevOps fundamentals? How would you define it? And again, how are you related to this initiative?
Well, Dave was already quite comprehensive in describing what fundamentals is, but I think it's a complete toolbox, and you can really tell that it is community driven. It contains all the theory that you need at all the necessary levels. For instance, individuals, teams, management, the organization as a whole, and it also contains a lot of practices that you can apply immediately. As a coach or a trainer, but especially as a coach, I always recommend to have teams and key roles trained in fundamentals to achieve a critical mass for change. I think that's what fundamentals are very much suitable for.
Thank you, Jan. One more suggestion to our audience. Feel free to make that a dialogue. So I see quite a lot of people dialing in. Feel free to use the chat on your right and in your LinkedIn Live. Ask us questions. Feel free to participate. We would love to have this as interactive as possible. Right?
Yeah.
And now let's get started with our first topic. And this would be actually coaching with DevOps fundamentals knowledge. And Jan, again, back to you. From your experience, what tensions or conflicts in an organization have you observed to be an indicator for an opportunity to introduce DevOps fundamentals as a coach?
Especially actually a decreasing responsiveness of an organization. I think that would be, in most cases, would be number one for me, for an organization. I mean, you spend more and more money to achieve the same or less, and you can track very practical things like the lead time or the total cost of certain types of frequently occurring changes. So very practical. And if you plot that over time, you have a good indicator. And in most cases, that information is also available. So that's an important one. Responsiveness. That's very important for organizations these days, of course. And another very dangerous one is also staff turnover. I see that increasing because an organization does not work in a modern enough way. And well, we all know that employees nowadays have a very wide choice of vacancies. So that can also serve for the organization as a very early warning that you have to do something regarding the way you organize your IT.
All right, thank you. And now, Dave, thinking about the team level, from your experience, how would you recommend to assess the team state to make sure it is the right moment to train them in DevOps fundamentals? Would you recommend any specific steps to go through?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how you experience this, but talking about maturity levels, etc. It can be handful. It can be pretty handful. It can be actually a great tool. It can also be sort of a risk, because it can become a goal at itself, and it can become a sort of a management tool where teams are feeling that they are actually assessed. And not having the feeling that it's a tool for themselves to grow and to learn. So there's always a danger in setting any type of assessment or any type of maturity models with teams. So we have seen a lot of models passing by in the past 10 to 15 years, which have to do with agile, lean, DevOps ways of working, ranging from the CMM, the old school CMM levels. There's also some levels where you go from fragile to agile to anti-fragile. There's a lot of ways that you can actually use to give an indication of where is a team at in terms of maturity. What I find most important in this is that it's always a team thing, and that the team themselves find it a handful tool to do a self-assessment. So I usually talk about selfies, where teams actually take a picture of themselves based, of course, on a number of variables, and you can give those variables based on one of the key foundations of where we built our fundamentals version on, the latest one, which is comms, which provide a handful set of pillars with culture, automation, lean, metrics, and sharing, where on all of those different aspects, you can put a thermometer in your team, and you can see as a team, how are we doing with respect to a number of cultural elements that we all find important? How are we progressing in terms of adoption of lean and agile methodologies? So it really helps to give a balanced view to the team, which they can then use to self-improve. And what I then found most important is that not only the selfie itself is a team thing, but also what you do with it is also something that the team should have some kind of self-paced mechanism where they can choose their own path and their own journey towards the goal that they want to reach. So a lot of cases, there's a lot of things that are actually inflicted onto the teams, which the teams then, find a bit pushy and don't actually always value those types of information or those trainings or whatever to be the right timing. Have the teams actually in a certain flow where they can have a self-paced transformation based on those selfies. So for me, that's one of those lessons that I've learned in practice, what actually works in terms of team maturity.
You're right. I love it. I can totally see myself as a coach doing the so-called DevOps selfie, and also coaching for this self-paced learning environment. Now that we've set the stage, let us proceed further to the core of the session, adapting coaching practices to team maturity levels, right? So Jan, Dave already mentioned the acronym CALMS. How does this knowledge, so CALMS, influence the way a coach works with the newly formed teams? And what are the first steps as a coach to kick it off with such just newly created one?
Yeah, I do recall that we had quite some discussion about should we reintroduce CALMS in fundamentals or not, and in the end we decided to do that because, well, CALMS is quite old, but at the same time it covers everything an organization needs. And I always point out that the C is the first letter for a reason. It's the most comprehensive change, the most difficult change, also the hardest to measure. And new teams in particular often bump into silo walls right away. In culture, the aspect of psychological safety also comes into play. I think that's also very important, underestimated in most cases. A new team in particular needs to this in order to learn, to innovate, and to grow. I mean, is it safe enough for them to open their mouth? Is it safe enough to conduct an experiment with an uncertain outcome? It's all about and I'm only talking about the C now, but that's a very important one. And here lies an important role also for leadership, but also for the coach to convince leadership of that very important and at the same time almost invisible change that an organization has to start. What I also see in new teams and in unexperienced teams, I tend to adjust my tone of voice, and also my working level. I don't want new teams to lose heart when they realize how much blood, sweat, and tears they still need to go to the desired level in, let's say, in 1 year or 2 years or maybe even more years. And I do want them to also to realize the big picture. And Calms gives you actually that big picture, because all the aspects of Calms are important. And you can measure yourself as an individual, but also a team and also an organization on what level you are regarding Calms. And what I also always have to stress is that teams should actually demand time to implement the change, and don't just do that on the side, because I see in many cases that teams or individuals are kind of forced to do that in such a way, and well, that also leads to a not so happy work environment, and well, you should try to avoid that.
If I might add to that, Jan.
Oh, please.
Fully agree with you. So if I may add, another thing that I find really important when adopting Calms is that it's in balance. So if you look at teams that are, for instance, pretty high, that have pretty high standards already in terms of automation, so they have their pipelines in order, and their development practices are okay. Operations and support is going pretty good as well in terms of tooling and automation. But for instance, metrics and for instance, the sharing part and the culture part is not, it's not very much in order. If you have those teams themselves actually pick the next thing that they want to do, and when they've done a selfie, they might be inclined to actually pick another automation thing because they like to do this. They're into this. They know that they have a high level. So they might be more engaged in actually doing more of that same automation. And that's where the coach comes in and does a reflection and says, okay, maybe it would be good to be a bit more balanced in those 5 pillars, because otherwise, you have a great tool, but you don't have the right setup in your team to actually make success out of it.
Right. Yeah. So success is a moving target, right? And this is one of the reasons why we coach for DevOps and how we balance performance and change.
Yep.
And Dave, if we can keep on. So we're now in the learning curve, right? We have the newly formed team, and then Jan kicked it off for us. So from your personal experience, how does your coaching differ when working with more mature and DevOps Agile teams? So we are already a bit further away on the learning curve, and also on the performance curve, of course, as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to distinguish coaching types and stages where you could be in terms of how do you actually help a team, and does that differ over time? I usually use a threefold approach. So I see, there's the mentoring, there's the coaching, and there's the advising. And I see those stages actually occur in virtually every team that I've been involved with, where usually at first in most topics, you as a coach have more of a mentoring role, sometimes teaching, but it means to actually explain the basics and make sure that you have a common understanding. What I just talked about, the common taxonomy, so you have a common understanding of all the basic principles, of all the basic instruments that you can use. This is the language that we're using, and also in order to be able to collaborate also with the other teams, it would be good to actually have to adopt the same language there. And that's what you do at first. That's your mentoring stage. You show how it's done. Then there's the phase where you actually do more of coaching, which means that you're involved with the team. You help them reflect. You observe the team. You see how they're doing. They're adopting the practices in all of the comms pillars, in all of those different aspects of DevOps. And it's up to you to actually be the reflector, to be the mirror of the team, and to help them grow from there. And then you have more of the advisor role, which means that you have more of a distant role, and you observe the team as well. But the team usually comes to you when they have a specific question, when they have a theme that they want to address. Please help us fix this cultural issue with our product owner. Please help us set up a good backlog where we have enough also room for lifecycle and operation stuff instead of only the new features. So please help us with specific themes. And those types of styles, actually, as a coach, they can range also in terms of the maturity that the teams have themselves. So a team that's already working with this way of working for quite some years, they may be having a sort of advisor role. They may need a sort of advisor role from a coach for specific teams, whereas the teams that's just starting and forming, you have a slightly different role. So you talk about the same topics, but you have a different role in conveying the information, bringing the information to the team.
All right. Totally makes sense. And Jan, let us pick up from here, right? So from the maturity levels, back with you, Jan. Can you provide us, please, insights into adapting coaching techniques, again, based on DevOps fundamentals or your own experience, or maybe both, to meet the unique needs of different team maturity levels, right? Especially after the forming phase, so storming, norming, performing. Yeah. How would you approach that?
Yeah, I think fundamentals is a great starting point. I use actually a technique that was already in the previous version of fundamentals. I always have the team map out three things. First, the actions that the team can carry out themselves. They're actually their backlog on different levels. Two, the prerequisites they think should be taken care of first by somebody else, maybe the team itself, or maybe management, or maybe external, maybe. And third, the impediments they see as inevitable concrete blocks. So you plot that from left to right. I just do it. I have them do it with stickies. And if a team is able to take control of their DevOps journey, you'll see them sticking mostly left to their own backlog. We can do this ourselves. And the more they feel dependent on management, on decisions elsewhere, the more they will stick to the right, to the prerequisites and the impediments. And that says something about the situation in the organization, something maybe about the autonomy in the team, or something about the courage in the team, but also about the organization as a whole. And then actually the coaching part really starts, because then I'll challenge them to turn as many prerequisites and impediments as possible into actions for themselves. And then again, you will notice a huge difference between teams. Some teams are able to shift stickies from impediments and prerequisites to actions, and some teams, they just cannot do that. They cannot figure out how they would be able to do that. And sometimes I also get management involved to show them actually what stage those teams are actually in. And sometimes, in most cases, I see very different teams in just the same organization. So depends a lot on people, depends on maturity, depends on age, depends on background. So a lot of things are actually would help it would help it improve, or maybe not. So yeah, it does also a lot of things with the end goals. Will they get closer by doing such an exercise or not?
Right. And I'm interested, so on the part of prerequisites and impediments, you just shared with us that you often involve management when required. So as a coach, what would you recommend? What is your preferred method of involving the management? Is it an interview? Is it a one-to-one coaching? So not to put words in your mouth, but this is an example that I would use, and I was interested to hear about your opinion.
Yeah, well, actually, in this case, it is in most cases for me. It's on a personal basis to make sure that behind the curtains I will be able to direct some people in the right direction. That works for me. That works best, and I also think for management actually. So that's
all right.
In most cases the way I do that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And we have a question from the audience. Falco asks, when do you use that early in the training? So I assume, Falco, you refer to the point about action, prerequisites, and impediments. So specifically this practice, at what point would you use that, Jan?
Actually, from the very first minute in the training, because I challenge them to have everything that comes along during fundamentals to stick that as a action for themselves, or maybe as a prerequisite, or maybe as a impediment. So from the very first minute to the last minute, and in the end, after 2 days, we'll have 3 columns, and yeah, based on how they stick it, you can tell how this team will perform in the coming months.
Right. All right. So it's an ongoing exercise. It's not a one-time shot, right?
No, and especially when I come back sometimes, then we revisit actually that particular overview to check what happened in the meantime. And well, in most cases, I have to pay some visits to management again to make it a little bit more to speed it up a little bit more.
All right.
To make it uncomfortable for them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Good. Looking at the time, we're somewhere around the half of our session, and let us move on to the next subtopic: overcoming common challenges, obstacles when building the high-performing teams. Dave, back with you. What are some typical obstacles that we coaches may encounter when introducing DevOps and Agile practices at an enterprise level, and how can these hurdles be addressed?
Yeah, there's quite some potential hurdles, of course, and I think we've all seen them, right? So if you're a coach or if you're a practitioner or whatever you are, I'm pretty sure that you've all seen the examples of, for instance, the finance and budgeting system, which actually does not comply with new ways of working. So you want, for instance, autonomous teams, product teams, DevOps teams, autonomous Agile teams, whatever you want to call them, and you want them to make their own decisions. In addition, you want, the value streams actually comprising all of those teams, value streams or trains or clusters or tribes or whatever you want to call them, and you also want to put autonomy over there. And if they don't have the real autonomy because the finance and budgeting system does not lend for it, and we're still budgeting projects instead of just budgeting those long-lasting value streams, for instance, those are typical hurdles that we see in practice. In addition, what I also see a lot, the term frozen middle is probably a well-known one, whereas you usually cannot blame the frozen middle because
can you please explain it for our audience?
The frozen middle is actually the middle layer, the middle management layer in your organization, which actually looks up and looks down, and gets maybe even old school orders from top, right? And looking down, they see all of those autonomous teams wanting freedom, wanting to do whatever they think is best for their customer and for their particular for the particular value they want to realize. So they're usually in sort of a squeeze. And
right.
If you still have the old school structures, if you still have the old school governance and KPI structures, if you're still actually pushing those middle managers to focus on their own their own targets and their own objectives, instead of looking at the full system, instead of looking at the end-to-end value chain that you should be focusing on, then you're actually punishing the people who can't help it. So usually we see that as a typical path of resistance, where you need to help the organization to actually, on the one hand, restructure, on the other hand, also create new behaviors and prevent that those people actually show that behavior in the middle management as well. And this is a typical example behavior that I see, is that there's actually a great German word for it. You've worked in Germany for quite some time, Marianne. So the Germans have created a word for fake change, and fake change actually is also happening in management, especially also in middle management. And the Germans have created a word for it, which is called Eisenbahnscheinbewegung. And Eisenbahnscheinbewegung means railway fake movement, and it's the feeling that you get where you're in a train and you're on a railway station, and the train next to you is moving, and you get the fake sense of movement because the train next to you is moving.
I love the metaphor.
Exactly
Absolutely.
what's happening a lot in middle management, where they see a lot of movement happening left and right and top and bottom, and they think they're moving themselves, but in the meantime they're actually pretty robust, and they're pretty much do exactly having the same behaviors as before. So people need to realize that if you see fake change around you, you need to call it out and make sure that everyone changes in the system.
Right. And as a coaching consultant, how would you specifically address the frozen middle? So do you defrost it, break the ice, melt it?
Same as with every frozen part, if it's frozen teams or frozen middle, it doesn't matter. It starts with rewarding the right behaviors. So, and that starts at the top. So if you're in the board, or if there's a management team, actually, where all of those middle managers are looking up to, it usually starts over there. If they still have the old way of steering, if they still have the old KPIs that have been put in place, if they still use the old governance structures, instead of actually enabling also those middle managers to actually execute new ways of management as well. So to be a facilitative manager, to show coaching behavior towards the teams, to help get rid of impediments, and that's what you want to move towards, and then that eventually starts at the top.
If I may add to that,
Please.
Yeah. I sometimes even get hired by the frozen middle, as Dave called it, and sometimes I have to deal literally with managers who gradually discover that as a result of the DevOps introduction, they will not stay in their current position for long, and that's of course very difficult to fix in the short term. The point is that what I always say is that DevOps done right turns your entire organization upside down, and most organizations are just not aware of that. In 2020, I published a LinkedIn article with the title "DevOps is a Trojan horse of the indispensable kind," and that is actually explaining what will happen in your organization when you let the DevOps horse in without realizing what is actually in the belly of the horse.
Can you summarize very shortly the takeaways for us, or shall we post the link and go read it?
Well, summarizing is actually in one sentence, maybe the fact that there are people on board. Let's say who value stream warriors who are taking end to end actually literally. So it will tilt your organization from a vertical orientation to a horizontal orientation. So I think that's the bottom line. What is actually happening when that belly is opening and those people are entering your organization. Yeah, we should include a link.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Okay.
Great. All right. Staying with you, Jan, can you share some specific examples of how applying DevOps knowledge, again, thinking about comms in general, has resulted in improved team performance and outcome?
Yeah, actually, I'm a very practical guy on all the levels, even management levels, and I always keep an eye on both the technical and the organizational side. And I always start on the technical side by using the four key DevOps metrics like deployment frequency, lead time for changes, time to restore services, and
right. The classics, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then I ask what the team actually contributes to those, and what are the current values, and how will the team be able to improve those. Or and I sometimes also ask the same question to management levels, and because I mean the metrics that they are just metrics. They are not the buttons you can turn. So you have to find a good working combination of leading and lagging indicators, of course, and fundamentals is providing that information. So I ask it to the teams and to management, and maybe they also can explain to me why they are not able to improve those. So, and then in most cases, we get from technical issues, we get into the organizational issues. And then I have some extra information that I can address at management level. Or sometimes there is a huge list of technical issues. And what always works in a very practical way is, and I've done that in several organizations up till now, is distinguishing between different types of change in an organization, and then exploring how the simplest type of change could be accelerated. And that makes people to start have confidence as a team that the organization can be moved. And then, for example, we built a very, very tiny, thin CI/CD pipeline for a very, very specific type of changes. And we will make sure that they go to production fully automated within seconds. And they start to have confidence in that even their organization with a lot of legacy and a lot of issues will be able to grow a real CI/CD pipeline in the near future. And of course, in the meantime, also a lot of organizational issues will pop up. They will naturally actually surface. And that gives me a lot of ammunition for my consultations with management and also the board, because, well, they, in most cases, they can only be resolved at a higher or maybe the highest level in an organization.
Right. From the top of your mind, can you give us an example of these organizational issues? What is the most common one?
Yeah, if you summarize it, it comes in most cases down to one word: silos.
Right. The famous silos.
It all boils down to that actually. Yeah.
Dave, the Germans have a word for that as well.
For silo, I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, absolutely agree. I observe the same behavior. All right. Same topic, but moving to you, Dave. Can you share your personal examples of resistance, skepticism you have encountered when implementing DevOps practices for teams? How did you address these? And here, maybe the keyword is how to mess up your DevOps journey.
Yeah. How to mess up your DevOps transformation. Yeah. Well, the first way to mess up your DevOps transformation is to call it a DevOps transformation. And that one's stuck with me for quite some years now. I've seen a lot of organizations who have started up a DevOps transformation or whatever. And the thing is that you introduce another label in the company. And the label is, the means instead of the target, instead of the goal. So you're introducing a DevOps transformation, whereas actually it should go, and it should, be all about the goals that are behind the DevOps transformation itself. And that's what I encounter a lot when I'm dealing with teams, is what I call change fatigue. So a lot of those teams actually they've been hammered with all of those new brands and all of those new labels in the past 10 to 15 years. So it was Agile, it was Scrum, it was Safe, it was Lean, it was Kanban, it was DevOps, it was SRE. So there's and now it's platform engineering, and you get AI, and there's so many things that those teams are thinking, okay, so we have to deal with all of these changes, but how do they relate to each other, and what kind of value do they bring to us, and what kind of value can we actually increase in terms of the value that we deliver to our customers. So that's the question you need to address. So the question you need to address is, why is this important, and why is this important for us as a team? And I've seen too much that labels are being carried in, and just this is how we start doing things around here, and then you get methodological wars because people have done it in another way at their own company. They have used different methodologies, and they will have different labels on their mind. Whereas in the end, we all have the same goals, right? We all have those business objectives that we want to achieve. As long as we are all, aware of those eventual business objectives, as long as we all know what our part in achieving those business objectives is. So how can we actually contribute to a faster time to market for the products and services of our business? How can we actually contribute to having a higher customer satisfaction rate of our end customers, of our consumers? And those are the questions that you want to address and that you want to focus all of your change efforts on, instead of humping in with another Trojan horse and with a new label coming in, just making sure what's the reasoning behind this. And that's one of those key things I find also when you're teaching things like DevOps fundamentals. Keep hammering on the why instead of hammering on the labels and the practices behind it. Make sure that the team actually really understand why will we adopt this kind of practice? Why do we need to change our way of working and adopt this new mindset? What will it bring to our own customers in the end, our own stakeholders? And that's, in my opinion, that's most fundamental.
Right. Focus on common business objectives, focus on common ground, right? If I may summarize.
By the way, and maybe to shed a different light on it, I'm also working together with all of the colleagues at DASA at a new portfolio management program. And that one really helps to let the organization actually think continuously about those business objectives and how can we as a team, but also as a team of teams and value streams or programs or tribes or whatever you're having as teams of teams, how can we all contribute to those business objectives, and what kind of decisions do we make? So actually not only thinking about, do we do the things right, and do we have the right methods and the right methodologies adopted, but also do we do the right things? And so also in choosing which products or services or which changes do we actually put our capacity in, and that's where portfolio management comes in. So that actually is a really good add-on next to what you're doing at the team level, but also what you should be doing, or could be doing on a strategic level as well, and to focus on those business objectives.
Right. And what is the role of a coach? So here we are at the Art and Science of DevOps Coaching. Our target audience are DevOps coaches and practitioners. So what is the role of the coach in the DASA portfolio management?
But to me, whether you're an agile coach or a DevOps coach, you should be the glue between what's happening on a team level or individual level versus what's happening on the organization-wide level. So you should be some kind of tool and facilitator to make sure that what's happening in one part of the organization, that the team is aware of it, and whatever the team is developing, that other teams are also aware of what those teams are developing, so that you can promote reuse and that you can enable alignment and collaboration to the most. So your role actually is more of a connector or facilitator, and also making sure that teams actually keep learning not only from themselves but also from the other teams, and that they also keep learning from the feedback that they get from the business, and whether you're actually realizing the value that you thought you would be realizing.
Yeah, cross-pollination, so to say.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Great. Already subscribed. But now also looking at the time, guys, I could do that for hours, but for the sake of punctuality, we have 15 minutes left. Moving to the closing part of our session, measure impact and success as a coach. So very often we are challenged to deliver tangible results and also to measure the impact and progress. So Jan, to you, from your personal experience, can you provide guidance on setting benchmarks for teams as part of the coaching process based on the training's theory?
Yeah, I think benchmarks vary from team to team. At least they have to be achievable targets, of course, with which, in my opinion, the team should largely decide for themselves.
Sorry to interrupt you. Who decides if they're achievable?
Sorry?
Who decides if they're achievable?
I think the team itself.
All right.
And if a team is not really connected to the business they are working for, well, then you will see that in the results, of course. But then you have a whole different conversation, I think. So I think you have to leave it to the team as soon as you are sure that we are dealing with a serious team. So I would split those two discussions actually, and that's what I do in most cases. But I challenge them also to have to that they have to realize what they are planning, that they have to set a pace they can sustain. I mean, they are not running a relay; they are running a marathon. So. And sometimes I even threaten to stop working on some goals if there is opposition in the organization, usually on the other side of the fence. And then I engage with the relevant parties and management to get things afloat, and in which I point out what is actually going wrong on the other side of the fence. And I always ask the question, this is one of my favorite questions, at management level, is do you also work for this organization? Because your decision last week did not benefit this organization. You just have swept one tile clean, but the whole pavement is still a mess. So I really like to have that kind of discussions in a team. And I mean, there's always room for improvement. I always refer to the pursuit perfection principle within Lean. I mean, even within Toyota, improvements are still made every week. I visited Toyota in Japan in 2018, and I was really surprised by the huge list of improvement proposals on the work floor after more than 18 years of building cars. Do you still have improvement? Yeah, and they keep coming every week. It's really amazing. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And now a bit more on personal level, Dave, switching to you. How do you know you're a successful coach? How do you specifically measure your progress with the team?
Well, I just asked the team. But yeah, it's a bit corny. But
wise.
Yeah. The thing is, whether you're a coach or a transformation leader or just a business leader or an IT manager or whatever, for me the most powerful question that you can ask is, what behavior do you need from me for you to be successful, right? So if you keep asking that question, but also if you make sure that you help the people that you're asking those questions actually really formulate it in the right way and be tangible, be as specific as possible. So what exactly do you really need from me in order for you to be successful? The more you're able to make that really tangible, the more you will be able to have continuous dialogue with that team, whether it's a management team or just or a product team or whatever. The more you will be able to have a dialogue with the team on this and to reflect on it every week or every few weeks and to see whether you're actually making progress. But next to that question, I would say I usually don't focus on output. So I don't focus on how many trainings did I do with the team. how many workshops that we do, how many selfies do they actually execute per month or whatever. That's really, yes, it may be relevant, but it's far more relevant to actually focus on the outcome. So does the team know what kind of value they should be delivering? Does the team know also what their change goals are? So what do they want to achieve in terms of, shorter lead time or higher, customer satisfaction or higher customer effort score or whatever it is that they want to achieve? I try to contribute the most to actually, getting the most outcomes for those teams, and that's something I'd like to be measured on.
Agree. So be tangible, specific. Don't focus on outputs. Focus on outcomes and jointly define the change goals.
And if you have that discussion with the team, you also help the team for themselves to realize, okay, what are our potential outcomes and what exactly do we want to achieve as a team, so that we can actually hold Dave accountable for his role in this.
Right.
And if I may add to that, I also it's a very tiny thing, but when I am with a team, I from the very beginning I talk about we have to achieve something, and that little thing actually helps enormously to establish a good relationship with the team and also achieve successes, because I am also part of the team. So, and when it is not going to be successful, or maybe there is failure, or there is whatever issues, then I'm also part of the we. So that little thing helps a lot to establish a good relationship from the very beginning.
Right. And maybe one last question from the audience. Daniel asks us, is lower attrition rate a good indicator?
Attrition of what? So
I assume, Daniel, of team members.
Okay.
So turnover rate.
It could be, but the question is this an outcome, or is this more like output or whatever? And actually, is it formulated in the right positive ways to actually formulate the right metrics in terms of what you actually want to achieve? Because, for instance, if you're focusing on, we want to make less mistakes, you could also have a sort of counterproductive effect, that the team will stop doing any change or whatsoever to the code, because then they won't make any mistakes anymore. So you always have to be wary of having people who game the metrics that you're using.
All right.
Oh yeah. So this actually what Daniel is talking about is what we also have addressed in DevOps Fundamentals 3 very much indeed by now, which is better value, sooner, safer, happier. So we're actually focusing on the eventual goals behind the DevOps transformation. So to make happier customers, happier employees, to make safer products, to have a higher value, to make better products, better quality, and to have it sooner as well. So we really have included examples and how you can measure this very well in the new version.
Right. Okay. Let's move to Jan.
Yeah, one last remark to the question from Daniel about the attrition rate. Sometimes I come in an organization where some people are in a golden cage, which means that if they leave, they are going to earn less.
Very good point.
And then I have a low attrition rate, but it's not what I want.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good insight. And moving to the closing questions, guys. Dave, what is the major message from these discussions that you would like to pass to the audience to take with them after today?
I would say stop the cargo culting and the labeling. So focusing on the why, and actually, if you look at the DevOps Fundamentals 3, we have included BVSSH, we have included OKRs, so we have a lot of guidance which actually can help you to focus on the why instead of bringing in new labels. That's one. 2, I would say, if you see fake change happening around you, call it out and make sure it goes away. That's also addressed in the culture and leadership parts that we have in DOF 3. And the third one would be invite over inflict. So making sure that you actually make it attractive for the teams to do their selfies, to grow, to learn, to experiment, etc., instead of pushing all of those methodologies and the labels and the metrics and the goals, etc., to those teams. But actually inviting them to grow and creating platforms where they can have their own journeys plot out for them, and using DOF3 as some kind of Lego box, and just picking up the practices that are really useful for you at that point in time from all of the comms areas.
All right. Yeah, and what about you? What are the major messages from this discussion you would summarize to our audience today?
Yeah, I would say DevOps means blood, sweat, and tears, but the returns are also huge. Second one would be DevOps turns your whole organization upside down in the end if you do it right. So be prepared. And third, I believe that DASA is a one-stop shop for all your DevOps needs. So yeah, that is the way to go, I would say.
Awesome, impactful. Dave, would you like to be contacted by our guests after this webinar? What is the preferred media they should reach out to you?
If you Google for Dave van Herpen, you can't miss it. I'm the only one who has that name, I believe. So people can find me via LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you prefer. And so please do reach out. I'd be happy to be in any kind of conversation when it comes to these kind of topics.
Awesome. What about you, Jan? Would you like to be reached out by our guests, and what is your preferred media?
Also preferably by LinkedIn, and I cannot say the same as Dave. I mean,
there's a lot of people called Jan de Vries in the Netherlands. A lot.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if you look for my name and then DevOps or maybe the Trojan horse or yeah, that kind of thing. So DevOps related in most cases, then I will surface.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. For our listeners who send in their questions, thank you very much. Dave, Jan, and myself will share additional key takeaways document coming next week. We'll provide a summary of today's conversation as well as the recording. So keep an eye out for that. We really hope that you found this episode of The Art and Science of DevOps Coaching insightful, valuable, inspiring. And remember, whether you're a seasoned pro or a beginner in the DevOps space, there is always room to grow and learn. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to join us in the October session. The topic will be driving value with DevOps, coaching agile teams in transition. And on behalf of you guys, Dave and Jan, and our team behind the scenes that are part of the Art and Science of DevOps Coaching, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to continuing this journey into the world of DevOps with you in our next episode.
Thank you for having me.
Any last words, guys?
No, thank you. It was a blast. Thanks, Marian, for hosting us.
It was my pleasure. Keep learning and keep with DevOps, even though it's blood, sweat, and tears, it's worth the effort.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Wish you a nice day and a nice afternoon ahead.